Frankenstein, The Creatures of Prometheus. Prologue. August 8, 1918, Amiens, France. Red. Everything was red. The walls, the stones of the chateau fireplace, the fading light of the afternoon sun spilling through the shattered windows. Dr. Victor Frankenstein jammed his eyelids shut, and still all he could see were after-images of red. His bandaged hands, splattered with the infernal color, trembled as he struggled to write. The hue cast by the firelight illuminated dark marks smeared across the wide plank floor. They glowed like a bizarre long-wave version of Curie's radium. He thought to beat back the pools of thick liquid that spread unchecked through his thoughts, until it seemed the very memories conjured up by his mind were coated in the cloying crimson film. Red, the color of the flickering kerosene lantern shining through the floor-to-ceiling window, beckoned to the discarded bodies of dead soldiers left behind in the chaotic retreat of the Kaiser's armies. Red, the color of war. 4 years of it. Verdun, the Somme, and now the disaster at Amiens. Victor Frankenstein paused in his recording of formulae and surgical instructions to marvel at how long the war had taken to imprint the color into his brain. He had resisted for as long as he could remember, but now it was almost over. The color would win soon. He had to write quickly. By the summer of 1918, all personnel behind the lines realized that the German troops were locked in a futile struggle to hold back the numerically superior British, French, and Australian forces. Across the western front, the German armies finally buckled after years of trench warfare. At Amiens, those lines broke, sending soldiers and their support structures, supply lines, dressing stations, and divisional field hospitals all reeling backwards, uprooted in an 11-kilometer chaotic retreat on the first day. The end was near, a conclusion Victor Frankenstein realized he wouldn't see. He remained behind in the shattered building that served at the beginning of the war as the German field hospital, but quickly was converted to a morgue. The abandoned structure originally lay kilometers to the rear of the killing fields of the trenches, but with the arrival of some of the fortunes of the conflict shifted one final time. The collapsing German military now left the once secure location in jeopardy of being overrun. At night, Allied artillery shells detonated overhead, showering the darkness with flaming sparks and flesh-tearing shrapnel. During the day, the constant crackle of small arms fire, like the concussive rattling of millions of bones, grew louder and closer, along with a different sound, the roar of tank engines. The new marvel of modern warfare, unleashed by the hundreds, crushed the once impregnable German trenches under its steel treads. For the past 24 hours, exhausted and demoralized troops led by battered military vehicles, a few motorized but most horse-drawn, poured away in disorganized flight from the battlefield. The surge of humanity churned the usually dust-covered road that traversed the surrounding fields and vineyards into a river of black mud stained with the sick of blood from the wounded and the dying. All the staff nurses and his fellow physicians from the 23rd Divisional Field Hospital joined the exodus to the east. Victor Frankenstein was left alone, except for the bodies. Sometimes he imagined he could sense movement in the few rigid forms visible outside amidst the bomb craters. Other times the arms and limbs lay in an eternal gray stillness. The makeshift operating room behind him had been quiet now for hours, only disturbed by the roar of guns approaching closer from the horizon to the west. The ground trembled. Jars of tissue samples and carboys of chemicals, as if in ants, were rattled in their flimsy shelving. Victor sat and wrote feverishly by the flickering light of a single kerosene lantern, its supply of fuel almost exhausted. Chemical formulae, equations, quickly scratched surgical diagrams, all spread in a handwritten jumble across the sweat and blood-stained papers in front of him. The answers seemed close and yet elusive. Distracted, he didn't look up when an enemy soldier forced his way past the wreckage of the front door and now stood on the threshold of the room with a rifle pointed directly at Victor's head.